it was a fever pitch of reception. You know, the audience was rabid to have more.
By the time Dirt came around, you could really hear that they had leaned into like this darker, doomier. I mean, the songwriting progression is insane, number one.
So I was going to show you this. This is one of my prized possessions. It holds up as one of the greatest albums of all time.
It's officially been 30 years since Alice in Chains completely eradicated the notion of a sophomore slump with their album Dirt. Released 2 years after their debut Facelift, this new set of songs revealed a deeper and darker side of Alice in Chains than anyone had ever seen before, and still holds up as one of the most beloved rock albums of all time. Over the course of this video, you're going to hear more about the story of the album with the help of some special guests who lived through it. In 1992, Seattle was completely under the spotlight of the music industry. The year prior had generated albums such as Temple of the Dog, 10 by Pearl Jam, Nevermind by Nirvana, and Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden. Alice in Chains' debut Facelift came out in 1990, but the video for the hit Man in the Box was released in 91 while they were opening the massive Clash of the Titans tour, which was headlined by thrash giants Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. They weren't treated too kindly by metal fans in the beginning, but once Man in the Box was put into heavy rotation on MTV, they started to gain a new respect from a wider audience.
From like 8 to 11, I was like a super Metallica fan. So when they used to do like, video premieres, so you would never have heard the new song before. They would do like, new Metallica videos that premiere on MTV. So I remember them saying that they were going to premiere the song that was going to be Enter Sandman that no one had ever heard yet. I was sitting in front of the TV waiting for that video to come on. Or one of the final videos they played before they debuted it was Man in the Box. It sounded so different, from everything that I was listening to at the time. They were the band that was really blurring the line to me between metal and what would, I guess, be called grunge or heavier alternative. Like, they were heavier. And obviously hearing Lane's voice was, crazy at the time. That was, there were a lot of great singers coming out around that time, but he was one of the guys that stood out the most. And even the video with, the guy with his eyes sewn shut, and it was all just really jarring, I guess, at the time.
Between 1992 and 1994, I know there was a quote that Jerry did. I forget in what issue of Rolling Stone, but he talked about everything was full throttle, that they were running at full speed with their eyes closed, and so were we all.
I just remember, they're just such an individual sounding band. Like, they don't sound like anyone else. They're heavy, but they also are super fucking catchy, groovy, and they were just one of the first bands I'd heard, and I was like, damn, this really is up my alley in terms of the style blending and the guitar playing and the singing. And
while they weren't winning over the hearts of the audiences on the tour, they were in the studio working on a single for an upcoming Cameron Crowe film about Seattle called Singles. Their labor didn't just result in one song, though. They ended up with enough material to release an EP, which arrived in February of '92 and was titled Sept. In April, Alice got together with Dave Jordan, who they worked on Facelift with, and started on album number 2. They headed down to Los Angeles, and the day they started recording also marked the first day of the LA riots, which were the result of the acquittal of 3 law enforcement officers who beat an unarmed Rodney King in March of '91. The band had been watching the news when the verdict was announced, and watched as the city began to unravel. They ventured out to the desert of Joshua Tree for a couple days to escape the chaos, and then returned to work. Jerry later noted that the dark aura of those times added another layer of despair to the overall feel of the album. Another thing that really set the songwriting process for Dirt apart from that of Facelift is that it was more collaborative between the members, so there was a lot more diversity in that regard. Whereas they had just been wanting to put out an album the first time, now they were really taking their time and making sure the quality was up to par with what they knew they were capable of. The single soundtrack was released in June of '92, and everyone got their first taste of Dirt with Alice's contribution to the album, the spine-chilling Wood, which was dedicated to the late vocalist of Mother Love Bone, Andrew Wood, who died in 1990. Alice also made an appearance in the movie as a bar band, along with a couple of other notable Seattle musicians who had cameos and roles as well.
Wood is the best grunge song of all time. Like, to me, Wood is that's it. Like, if you had to explain that era to someone and pick a song, because it was tied into the Singles movie too at the time, and Singles was just beaten in your head as this is the grunge movie, and Wood was the song. So Wood is the song that that to me is Alice in Chains. I have to play it for someone, but
We started playing Wood back in June. Wood was an amazing transition from Facelift, but packaged in singles, it was hard to think of it as part of the Dirt record, and which I thought was fitting that it was the last song on Dirt, considering it was part of singles.
Wood certainly served as a precursor as to just how morbid the rest of the album would sound. The opening track, Them Bones, was then released as the album's second single in early September, and its ferocity only added to the anticipation for the record. Jerry Cantrell wrote in the liner notes of their 1999 Music Bank box set that he wrote Them Bones after thinking about his own mortality and how it's something that everyone eventually has to face in their own lives as well.
Them Bones, to me, was just a in-your-face wall of sound, very similar to We Die Young, which was the first song that I played off of Facelift when it was marketed to metal radio back, when they were just starting out. We were all thrilled, and the louder the better, certainly.
When the album starts with Them Bones, it's just one of the greatest openers ever. If you were to take an album, and it's like, what is the greatest album, first song on an album? I mean, Them Bones has got to be on that list. And, it's like 2.5 minutes, and it's there, and it's gone. It's just, there's something about it. It's the time signatures, the power, and of course the lyrics, which are just so great. Just like, it sets you up, just the minute you hear Them Bones, you're like, oh my God, what's next? And then it goes into Damn That River.
Them Bones into Damn That River is fucking preposterous. If you're like talking about like legendary opening twos on records, Them Bones into Damn That River is outrageous.
Dirt was released on September 29th, and the world was finally able to hear what Alice had been cooking over the 2 years since Facelift came out. It was much more grim than its predecessor. Most of the album's lyrics honed in on subjects like addiction, depression, relationships, and death, and the music was evidently a lot heavier, more brooding, sludgy, and complex. The band was able to fuel all of their inner emotions and demons into the compositions, and the results truly spoke for themselves.
I mean, even as a kid, I could tell that Dirt was darker. It's farther removed from, like, I guess, metal, or like, there's still like kind of like a sleaze element on Facelift. There's kind of like a swingy thing that like bands like Guns N' Roses and, Aerosmith and stuff like that did, that was still kind of a remnant on Facelift. You could tell that they were into that kind of music too. But by the time Dirt came around, you could really hear that they had leaned into like this darker, doomier. I mean, the songwriting progression is insane. And then if you listen to it compositionally, there's so much happening and so much layering. And it's so much more than just like, here's the riff, here's the vocal. If you listen to Dirt in headphones, the different stuff that's happening on the left and the right, the way the vocals are panned, the way the vocals are layered, the way the guitars are panned and overdubbed and layered is really complex. And it's not static, and things move from one side, from the center to the left and right. And there's just a lot happening.
I think certainly Dirt is an expression of that entire personal journey of just exploring all different avenues from different perspectives. So I think it was a lot more personal than Facelift. Dirt shows where Alice was at their best musically.
It's just fucking grimy. Like, I know if I had to assume, like, with them, like, maybe, I'm sure their lives are completely different than ours, but just in the same way where it's like, they're probably going through certain kind of shit time that just put a little extra fucking dirt on the sound of everything.
It was coming at you with so much power. The sequencing on the record is so important too. I consider it a perfect rock album.
One could even argue that Dirt was somewhat of a concept album. Lane Staley openly admitted that it detailed his journey with addiction and all of the highs and lows that came with it. He told Rolling Stone in 1992, "From song to song, the album changes from glorifying drugs to being completely miserable and questioning what I thought once worked for me. By the end of the album, it's pretty obvious that it didn't work out as well as I thought it would."
You knew these guys weren't faking. You knew they were living the lyrics. There was something very, very dark about the record and powerful. I could relate to it in many ways. Like so many other people at that period of time, whether they were young or older, those lyrics in that record and the feel of that record were something that a lot of people really related to at that period of time. I think it struck a nerve.
Regardless of thematic similarities between some of the songs, there was a strong diversity sonically. Them Bones and Damn That River served as the perfect opening grabber for listeners, but the pace nearly came to a screeching halt with the third track, Rain When I Die. That is, until Lane unleashed his mighty howl in the chorus.
When you work in radio and you have to play you don't have to play But when the singles get played more than the rest of the album, many times my ears gravitate to the songs that I can enjoy that I don't hear all the time. Rain When I Die has Lane's vocal quality in that song is so strong and so passionate and so piercing that song in and of itself has a really, really soft spot for me.
And I can listen to one hand, top rock vocalist, Freddie Mercury, Lane Staley, Maynard Keenan. If I'm just going on pure technique and like ability that's like raw and innate, incredible power, and incredible like elasticity, like all that stuff. And that's stuff that's just like, that's natural. He wasn't sitting around practicing singing.
Lane's top notch. I don't think anyone can really say otherwise. Like, you can tell he just doesn't give a fuck. He wasn't trying when he was singing. He wasn't thinking when he was singing. If you just watch him, he's just fucking bearing his soul.
Down in a Hole is the only acoustic song on the album, but that didn't make it sound any less despairing. Its follow-up, Rooster, was a very personal track that Jerry had written about his father's experience in the military during the Vietnam War.
The fact that Rooster and Down in a Hole, which are really complex, melodic, they're ballads without being like a love song. You know, they're dark, they're depressing. It's like basically more or less like, I mean, Down in a Hole is like a suicide ballad, you know, and that's insane.
Rooster really has a soft spot for me because I know the personal journey Jerry had to have gone through to put that song together. Not only a person coming from a very complicated family life, but also looking at it from his father's point of view. It's personal and it's powerful. To me, a different vein for Alice. So,
Iron Gland served as an interlude and featured vocal contributions from Slayer's Tom Araya, and Hate to Feel and Angry Chair were written solely by Lane. He even plays guitar on them too. The artwork for the album was shot by photographer Rocky Schenk, who'd worked with the band before and directed several of their videos. Alice actually came up with the idea to have a nude woman buried in a desert for the cover, so Schenk built the set in a room in his studio out of foam core and clay. While many people assumed that the model on the cover was Lane's then-girlfriend Demery Parrott, it was actually Mariah O'Brien, who'd previously been photographed for the cover of Spinal Tap's Bitch School, which was also shot by Schenk. O'Brien had to stay relatively still in the artificial hole that was built for her for about 8 hours total, but the final result couldn't have been more fitting for the album's overall sound. And speaking of videos, they filmed a total of 5 for the album for the songs Them Bones, Down in a Hole, Rooster, Angry Chair, and Wood.
It's like Alice in Chains could sneeze and they'd turn it into a video and put it in hot rotation, you know?
Like MTV was everything. Like people don't realize if they weren't alive back then, but MTV controlled everything. And if you were a band that was on rock radio and MTV at the same time, like it was just unavoidable that you were going to listen to that.
Dirt was positively received and ended up peaking at number 6 on the Billboard 200, which is kind of hard to imagine in today's musical climate.
It was a fever pitch of reception. You know, the audience was rabid to have more. Well, Tower Records Seattle was the location for the midnight release of Dirt. And you always have giveaways and prizes, and I don't know who gets credit for this. It certainly wasn't me. Everybody who came and bought a record or a CD got a bag of dirt. And inside the bag of dirt was plastic bones, and written on the bone was the prize that you got. Watching all these fans finger through their bag of dirt to figure out what they, you know. So the one thing that I don't think people thought about was everybody with their dirty hands on their CDs trying to get, you know, autographs from the band members. It was a lot of fun.
I think there was so much going on around that period of time. Looking at it as a guy who programmed MTV's music and videos, and also programmed a rock and alternative radio station, I know that rock radio was all over the record. The press, obviously, at that point, it was really obviously looking for more from the Seattle scene at that period of time. But I don't think it mattered at that point, because I think young people cared more about it. Radio certainly embraced it, no matter how dark it was. That was a period where it was okay to write dark lyrics. I mean, to have that feeling that was coming out with things like Soundgarden, of course, Alice in Chains. And, it was definitely a more introspective time.
Of course, due to the nature of some of the themes on the album, the band was pressed a lot about their addictions during interviews at the time, but members often kept the conversations more lighthearted. Anyone who knew them during that time knew that while they had their struggles, that was only a mere fraction of their lives and didn't represent their personalities whatsoever.
I was fortunate in the sense that being from their hometown, I got to see a different side of them than maybe other people outside of the market would see. So 1992, I'd say Seattle still had a bit of innocence left. As 1992 went into 1993 and went into 1994, not only bands and musicians moving to the Seattle area, but the obsession with the Seattle music scene. I think there's only so much you can analyze the music that people are obsessing about. So 1992 was still about the music, but I think 1993 was trying to find a dark, deeper meaning that may not have been covered in a mainstream media outlet, if that makes sense. Once it became so big, it's almost the classic story of once something gets big enough, you're looking for a way to tear it down, or you're looking for something that's going to sell the records, and it takes that more tabloid and paparazzi approach that it doesn't really have anything to do with the music. And I think Alice definitely, bared a lot of the burden of that, especially when addiction issues started interfering with concert tours or cancellations. It just gave something for media outlets to hook onto.
Dirt was a turning point for Alice in Chains in many different ways, but especially within the band. Early in 1993, while they were on tour, Mike Starr was fired. Lane later told Rolling Stone that it had to do with differences in their priorities. They wanted to tour a lot, and Starr didn't, though the bassist later claimed that it had to do with his addiction. The band had previously toured with Ozzy Osbourne, and his bassist, Mike Inez, ended up joining them. He's been with the band ever since.
I remember it being a pretty sudden announcement, and Mike Inez jumped right in. The Ozzy tour, if I'm not mistaken, started right before, if not the same month that Dirt came out. So certainly when Ozzy's tour finished, Ozzy didn't tour all the time. So it was very common for his band to sub or fill in other areas.
The mid-90s saw a lot of change in both the Seattle music scene as well as rock and roll in general. Alice followed Dirt up with an acoustic release called Jar of Flies in 1994, which was the first EP in history to land at #1 on the Billboard 200. But the death of Kurt Cobain 2.5 months later, the eventual disbandment of Soundgarden, and Alice's hiatus made room for a new breed of heavy music called nu metal to take the spotlight. A new wave of hard rock bands surfaced in the latter half of the 90s and were labeled post-grunge because the sounds of bands like Alice in Chains were evident in their sound. You know how this chapter of Alice's career ends, so instead we'll talk about how Dirt was a major influence on a lot of later artists, why it's loved by fans of varying audiences, and how it paved the way for introspective songwriting down the line.
It definitely influenced me, it definitely influenced us. Even in Dillinger's Escape Plan, we were there were times before I even knew Jerry that we would come up with parts and we would call it the Alice in Chains part. Or I would have a harmony on the vocal that we would reference the Alice in Chains harmony. Or is this the song that has the Alice in Chains part in it? Because when you hear something, and that's really difficult to do. It's really hard for bands to have a sound that's so unique that you can label a part the Alice in Chains part, and everyone in the band that you're talking to knows what that sounds like. That's very hard. Harder than replicating someone else's sound is having something that's that distinct that it sounds like you. It's hard to pinpoint, who and how they've influenced people because they're so iconic sounding. They're so unique, but they definitely do. They definitely did. I want to say probably, if I could really pinpoint it wouldn't be a sonic thing, it would be a thematic thing. Alice in Chains and Soundgarden both made it kind of okay for mainstream active rock bands to go down darker pathways thematically, lyrically, and not just be singing about how much they're rocking, or not just be singing about something abstract or partying or whatever it is, or how badass they are, whatever. They're singing about things that are more really introspective and dark and personal, and the kind of things that you write when you're at your lowest at 3 a.m. and no one else is around. And normally people wouldn't make that public. You would write that, and then you'd be the next day when you feel great, you'd be that's embarrassing. I don't want anyone to know about last night when I was super depressed and being all mopey, But they were writing songs from that position, putting that down in a song and having it be okay to write from that perspective was really attractive, and I think definitely changed the way people, write lyrics a little bit, as far as mainstream rock songs go.
I would say that Dirt is one of the records that really brought together the rock and metal audiences, and even the people that liked alternative with guitars that were loud and harder. Dirt had this, really is one of those records that so many people love for that reason, is had elements of metal, and it was heavy, but it was also different. The chord changes, the weird chord progressions, everything about in those songs is something that so many people could grab a hold of. I thought that was very cool. I think that Alice in Chains are still a lot of people's favorite band from that era.
I mean, I definitely just soaked it all in. But Dirt, I would just fucking replay it like over and over and over, and it just started to get into my blood. But I think every band right now would say that they're Alice in Chains, like in this world. You know, just you're putting out a good thing into the world. You know, by making music like that. It's like it lets people know, like, oh, it's okay to just fucking be yourself in the most true way, even if it's like fucked up, you know, because that's going to be better art than like anything else. Or, you know, Lane and Jerry, the whole band just clearly had that. And
though Lane and Mike Starr are both no longer with us, we're fortunate that Jerry, Sean Kinney, and Mike Inez are still performing songs from Dirt today. In 2006, they recruited William Duvall, and they've been performing and releasing albums ever since. Jerry also performs a lot of Alice's material on tour as a solo artist, which features Greg Puciato behind the mic.
Well, it changed for me drastically working with Jerry because I hadn't really listened that critically since I was a kid. Lane's voice and I tonally are fairly similar, but that's really accidental. Like, I didn't like say to myself, I'm going to try to sound like this person, but we happened to like break up at around the same point when we were singing, and we happened to hit like certain things kind of in the same way tonally. Most of the vocal stuff I didn't even really hone in on until I was getting ready to play with Jerry, and I was working with him, relearning those songs, but from the standpoint of only learning the Lane parts, and Jerry, you know, withholding his parts. You have to learn them much differently. It's crazy to me that I get to like, that I could stand next to Jerry and sing his parts, and Jerry's like, that was good, you know. I'm like, what? You know, Jerry to me is more of a songwriter. He's an artist. Like he's a songwriter and more than a guitar player. Like he gets talked about as a guitar player a lot. He plays guitar, but I'll tell you, from being around Jerry, like he would have been gifted at whatever he chose to do. As a guitar player, I think his real strength. Obviously, he has a way of making less notes go a really long way. He bends notes like really beyond where someone would normally bend and go into the next note. He like carries it over where a lot of people would start the next note. He's a melody machine, really. Like I could go on and on. Like he's my buddy, Ben Humphrey, but I could, honestly, I obviously love him as a person, but I have the utmost respect for him too.